I would like to support the calls by Bahraini human rights organisations to release the political prisoners from the jails in Bahrain. The Bahraini government is following in the footsteps of some other repressive governments in other parts of the world who are releasing prisoners who are convicted of criminal offences but keeping political prisoners in jail. This is a total human rights abuse to keep political prisoners in jail where they're in great danger of catching the really horrific COVID-19 virus. And I commend the work of organisations that are calling for the release of political prisoners from Bahraini jails. We know that the Bahraini jails do not have an effective medical treatment regime for prisoners. We know that sometimes medical treatment is withheld from prisoners as a form of punishment. But also this virus knows no boundaries. It doesn't, stop at borders of outside the walls of prisons. It doesn't stop at different country borders, different particular religious or ethnic groups. It affects everybody. And if the Bahraini government allows this virus to infect large numbers of prisoners in Bahrain, including political prisoners, that will get transmitted to guards, which will then get transmitted to their family members, which will then circulate through the Bahraini community. And so, this policy of the government of keeping political prisoners behind bars, political prisoners haven't harmed anybody. They haven't carried out any violent offences against anybody. In fact, they're campaigning against violent offences against ordinary Bahraini citizens. These people are heroes and they should be released. But even if the Bahraini government doesn't release them for the fact that these champions of democracy, they should at the very least be releasing them into the arms of their families and the community to stop the spread of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus. So
Okay.
I would like to support the calls, and I really hope the Bahraini government releases political prisoners urgently.
Speaking about the non-violent people or the people who were campaigning against the violent crimes, we remember Sheikh Ali Salman, who is well known for his modest speech and for his persistence to stick to the peaceful movements in Bahrain. Actually, if we hear all the speeches of Sheikh Ali Salman, we will find something similar between all of them, which is his call to stick to the peaceful movements and his call to the government to hear the people's demands and to try to find a ground which they can like have a dialogue or uh, let's say to hear the people demands and let them or do them what they want. So Sheikh Ali Salman is now behind bars since December 2014, and he is serving a life sentence because of these speeches. What is your comment?
Well, I think he is an absolute hero and he should never have been put behind bars in the first place. I think that's the first crime of the Bahraini government and he should be released absolutely immediately. And we need the movement, the community needs people like him because, these are the people who defend our rights. All over the world, there are people like him, and these are the real heroes of our communities. And I think every human rights injustice in any part of the world gives other dictators in other parts of the world uh, the confidence to carry out human rights abuses. And so the Bahraini regime, along with other repressive regimes or right-wing or dictatorial or anti-freedom regimes, all tend to follow the same sorts of policies. And I think if we can force the release of these human rights defenders from the prisons in Bahrain, I think then that will give confidence to campaigns in other parts of the world for political prisoners, similar heroes, to be released from prison there.
And amid the COVID-19 outbreak that is sweeping all over the world, knowing no boundaries and knowing no differences between the people, we know that the Bahraini prisons uh, are in poor hygiene conditions. They have the prisoners there are denied their basic right of medical care or of adequate medical care. Some of them were denied their treatments and medicines more than once. As Hassan Mushaima, who is a prominent opposition leader, his son in London had started hunger strikes more than once, calling on the Bahraini government and on its international allies to give his father his right to medical treatment and give his father his medications because he suffered from chronic diseases. Other detainees also, like Mr. Hassan Mushaima, suffer from chronic diseases and they are denied adequate medical care and tests like regular tests or so. So, amid all these miserable conditions or poor conditions in the prisons, what if COVID-19 knocked on the door of the Bahraini prisons? What will happen there?
Well, I think it would spread like wildfire. I think, the lack of access to proper hygiene, the lack of access to proper medical treatment, I think it's a horrific death. Like these stories you see from all over the world, where, this is an absolute horrific death. And it's especially bad in people who've got any um, prior other medical complaints. And I think the whole conditions of the Bahraini prisons mean that a lot of prisoners are already suffering from other medical complaints. And so this would be like a death sentence for a lot of those prisoners. And it's also probably it's not possible for prisoners to follow any kind of physical distancing or proper hygiene to protect themselves or protect other prisoners, especially as the Bahraini prison guards, I suspect they would not be respecting physical distancing from the political prisoners. So, this is very dangerous, but it's even dangerous for the prison guards. And, because even if the Bahraini government doesn't care about the political prisoners, this will go from the prisoners to the prison guards' families, and it might be brought in by prison guards and then infect the prisoners and then go back out again. It's a terrible, terrible virus, and I do not trust the government to keep the prisoners safe. The prisoners need to be released immediately from prison. I know the government has released a whole lot of other prisoners, but very few political prisoners. They've mostly released people prisoners who've been convicted of criminal offences. If they've released people who have been convicted of criminal offences, they should be releasing everybody. Every single political prisoner needs to be released immediately,
There is
absolutely
a single
immediately.
female, there is a single female political prisoner in the Bahraini prisons at the moment. Her name is Zakia Al Barbouri. She is a chemical engineer and she was convicted on political basis as all of the political prisoners in Bahrain. The Bahraini government released other women who were convicted over political charges but left Zakia alone, or left Zakia as the sole female political detainee in their prisons. The international calls and the Bahraini calls from several weeks are calling for the Bahraini government to release Zakia and let her go back to her family because at the end she doesn't represent any threat to the society.
Mm.
and the government is just like turning a deaf ear, assuming that they didn't hear anything.
Well, I think the reason why she's being kept in prison by the Bahraini government is um, is as a symbol and a threat to the Bahraini community. The she's being used as, I guess, a hostage, because it's to say that if you protest about attacks on human rights and democracy in Bahrain, or you support calls for human rights and democracy in Bahrain, this is what is going to happen to you. You'll be thrown in jail, and left there to rot. And I think that is probably the reason why they've released all of the other women political prisoners apart from this one. And so I think, yeah, she's being used as a hostage, like a human shield.
Mhm.
And I think she needs to be released immediately, along with all the other political prisoners.
Okay. So we know how you were supporting the Bahraini pro-democracy protest and the Bahraini campaigns since since years. What do you say to the Bahraini people after more than 9 years of fighting for their rights and freedoms?
I would say the Bahraini people who are fighting for your rights, I think you are heroes. I think every struggle in every country, in Bahrain and other countries, and including Australia here, every struggle for human rights and democracy boosts this movement worldwide, because we have an international movement. In every country, we've got people fighting for human rights and democracy, and you're part of that struggle. Your heroes, especially for standing up against such a tyrannical regime. We've got people standing up for human rights and democracy in Australia, because we also have attacks on human rights and democracy here, but we don't suffer such heavy penalties as activists do in Bahrain. And I'd say you are heroes to, to the Bahraini people, but also to the international community. And it's only through us developing international solidarity between all of these movements that we're going to win. We need to keep chipping away to win more and more human rights and democracy. So thank you for everything that all of the Bahraini people are doing to fight for human rights and democracy. Thank you very much.
Sue Bolton, Moreland Councillor and a member of Socialist Alliance, thank you very much for giving us your time to speak about what's happening inside the Bahraini prison.
Thanks, Fatima, and thanks for all of the work that the Gulf Institute does.
Thank you.